sovereignty.
Paris has been leading the way for so-called digital sovereignty.
What's the alternative? Is like giving up and say like, oh, we're just a digital colony going forward. This cannot be.
When will we know that sovereignty has arrived?
There are open source alternatives. If they were good enough, they would be already being used.
Today, we're talking about tech and how Europe might finally be at a breaking point with its addiction to US tech.
That's because France is looking to ditch Microsoft on 2.5 million computers. What we're really wondering, is this the latest European tech rebellion? Joining us now is Mark Scott. He's a senior resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. He has been following the tech world and digital policy for quite some time. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Mark. Just looking at this French shift now, and the moving out of these very essential programs, really, that are so much part of our everyday business life. Is this smoke or is this fire? Is this something is this a significant move? Do you think it's going to really affect France's ability to do business?
I mean, I think it's more smoke and mirrors more than anything else. Paris has been leading the way for so-called digital sovereignty in Europe, in which it's trying to decouple or at least pull back from the US on a variety of different things. It makes a good headline, but in reality, it's not going to change much. There's a reason why companies like Zoom and Microsoft have gain so much market shares, because people use them. And as much as the French government would like to be perceived or seen by its electorate to be doing this, in reality, it's not going to really shift the needle much unless they do this over an extensive, long 5-10 year period. And they have to sort of combine pulling back from the Americans by also creating services both in France and in Europe that sort of can match. And currently, there are a few that can do that.
Right, and going with what you say there, and why now? Why? What can we read from the timing of this?
It's a bit of both. So the relationship between Europe and the US, as we all know, has somewhat deteriorated over the last sort of 12-ish, 15 months.
Understatement, for sure.
And that's sort of like exactly. And within that context, Macron in particular has been leading the charge, as I said before, to say that, look, we need to be looking at European alternatives to the Americans. That has been going on pre-Trump. That was happening during the Biden administration, where, again, the Macron presidency and his government was looking to shift away, or at least put European money into European alternatives. I think that has stepped up quite significantly after the threats to Greenland, to be honest with you, around the Munich Security Conference. And since then, both France, to a lesser degree, Germany and other European countries have been sort of fast-tracking. They're looking for alternatives. Are the alternatives any good? Some are, some aren't. But I think it's more the mood music that Paris is trying to set in terms of, we're going to start shifting from Windows to Linux. We're going to start cutting back from Zoom to whatever the French equivalent is. That is trying to demonstrate that they're going to put the money where their mouth is. Unfortunately, for me, that is a long track record to get there.
I can't help but wonder, in the way that you're framing it, you're seeing these headlines, 2.5 million computers in the French government being moved away from Windows, for example. But is this something that Microsoft or the other big American tech companies are even going to notice? Or is this kind of like a mosquito biting an elephant right now?
They notice a lot. And it's not because 2.5 million computers from Windows to Linux is a lot. It is not, compared to how many computers must be in the French government. What is important for the companies, the American companies in particular, is if this is sort of the ebbing and flowing of a dam that's starting to break, and then 2.5 million computers leads to maybe a massive multi-billion euro procurement contract for cloud services, as that starts shifting away, that 2.5 million computers now adds up to billions of euros over a time span. So for the American companies, for the right and for the wrong, they see this as an existential concern for their European operations, because if 2.4 million computers can quickly turn into a massive multi-year cloud contract that disappears overnight.
There's this saying in German politics, Wandel durch Handel, basically change through trade. It rhymes in German. That it's this idea that increasing economic ties, even with adversarial nations, that it can bring the change that, Western countries want to see. We saw that a lot in the Merkel times with Russia, for example. And I'm wondering, has that borne fruit here? The US and Europe have been really close trading partners for a while, on the one hand, but on the other hand, was this divergence or this push for sovereignty inevitable, or was it the Trump of it all that kind of pushed this move towards digital sovereignty?
I think sometimes the Trump administration is 2.0, excuse me, is overestimated. Europe has been doing this for decades. I think it's escalated and been fast-tracked over the last 12, 15 months, but it was going on in Trump 1.0, in the Joe Biden administration, even with Obama. There has been an effort, and I'm old enough to remember a German-French search engine called Quiro that was created in the 90s, that was supposed to take on Google, and it completely failed. This is not new. This is, again, from the American side of things, they would be saying that, look, this is a typical European response to a problem that they could have solved if they had better products. I do wonder, to be honest, if this is good bang for the euro, to use a mixed metaphor for European citizens, in terms of just like, what are you getting for the money? If you're going to be spending more money on a worse product that is less secure just because it's European, that's a lot of money to spend when the European taxpayers aren't exactly got a lot of euros in their pocket currently. So I think part of this is about, yes, there's been a shift towards digital sovereignty, but there's also the other side of this is, yes, digital sovereignty is important, and I think Europe does need to be looking at its own path, but it also needs to be looking at how do you spend your taxpayers' euros in a way that is most efficient for citizens, and paying over the odds for a European alternative that isn't as good as an American one. I struggle to see how that's good taxpayer efficiency.
Yeah, I like that, the whole idea of bang for your euro. So when you think about these products, I mean, Zoom, basically ousted Skype, which I think was originally very European by nature and then became a Microsoft product. These are kind of staples in our offices nowadays. So I'm just sort of wondering, what products are they going to replace them with? You mentioned, we talked earlier as well a little bit about French innovations and France going its own way. Has France developed its own Zoom that will suddenly outperform the American rival?
I mean, Skype was, I believe, Estonian or Finnish, I believe, before it's been bought by Microsoft. So definitely had a European stint. There are French alternatives. There are open source alternatives, which are basically free for everyone to use, no matter where you're from. If they were good enough, they would be already being used. And therefore, I just struggle to see how a French government mandate to shift from Zoom to the French version of Zoom, yeah, that makes complete sense. The French government should spend money where it thinks it should spend money. But if it really was a commercial decision for the French government, they would have done it already. They wouldn't have had to make this a political statement of moving from Zoom to a European alternative.
It seemed like this American tech dominance has been a bit of a slow-moving train. That it was inevitable. You were going to see it coming over the horizon. Is that just my interpretation as someone who doesn't remember all these innovations from the 90s, or how do you view it?
Yeah. So I'm also old enough to remember the Microsoft competition case is also from the 90s, so I'm showing my age again. But I think the US has been dominant on the tech stack or tech ecosystem since Silicon Valley started 80 years ago. That's fine. I think sometimes the Europeans, particularly the European governments, play down their own indigenous tech sector. Paris, Berlin, even London, if we're sort of moving outside the EU for a little bit, they have extensively large, well-built and mature tech ecosystems. They're just not as big as Silicon Valley. But to be honest, Beijing, Shanghai are also not as big as Silicon Valley. So the dominance is there because they do consumer products. Everyone uses Google. They use Facebook. I was about to say TikTok, but that's Chinese linked, right? So there are alternatives out there. It's just the Europeans, for a variety of different reasons, which are frankly, around macroeconomic policy and the integration of the 27 countries, that just isn't as sexy as to say, why don't we have a European Google or European Amazon? If they were good enough, they would compete. There are questions about how the 27 countries work together. The market for digital services is still very divided between member states, but that's a different issue to say we need to push back on US dominance. I would argue we do, in terms of giving Europeans an alternative, but why say one or the other? Why can't it be European, American, Chinese, Canadian, Brazilian? It doesn't matter. If Europe does see itself as a free market, then free market economics is about competition, and you shouldn't, I think, be using government policy to shift from one or the other. You should provide the pillars for competition and then see what the market decides.
Mark, coming into this, the conversation in the newsroom was very much like, oh my God, 2.5 million computers are moving away from Microsoft. That was kind of like the buzz that we had. But what I'm hearing from you in a lot of ways, you've said if the product was good enough, it would already be being used by, you wouldn't have to convince companies or governments to use them. So I can't help but wonder, has the horse already left the barn here? Like, are the products just not good enough? And even if they were on par, if you're already locked into using Google or Microsoft or whatever it is a company, especially given the economic headwinds that Europe is facing, is a company going to invest the time and money to actually switch to something just because it's maybe as good but unknown and happens to be European?
I think there's a conversation going on both in governments and EU companies right now. But there are two things you have to think about. There's the sovereignty question, which is more political with a small p issue. And there's also the economic question and then the security question. If I'm going to shift from a Zoom to a non-Zoom European alternative, the security needs to be the same and it needs to cost me the same or less. Like, what is the economic value of me to do this, just other than waving the European flag? That's great. I value that. I think there is a need to create new European products on a global stage, but to do it as a tokenism doesn't help business, doesn't help government. It's just frankly, I keep saying it, but it's a bit of a gimmick. What would be helpful is to focus on, okay, if you really want to shift from a Windows to a Linux or European alternative, how are you creating the supply chain inside Europe to build the computers at an economic value that makes sense? How are you training the engineers and software developers to then provide the software to sit on top of that hardware which you've developed within the country, within the member states? How are you going to restructure the capital market? So instead of sending venture capital money, getting venture capital money or private equity money from the US because it's cheaper, how are you not getting that from Frankfurt or Paris? Those things are the real way you change this. That does not come from 2.5 million computers. That comes from looking at the long-term policy implications of a bunch of levers that aren't being pulled because they're hard and it's difficult. But if Europe really wanted to maintain its digital sovereignty, that's how I would do it. I wouldn't focus on the headline of we're going to shift some computers from one service to another.
So joining us now in the studio is Frank Karlitschek. He's the CEO and founder of Nextcloud. Frank, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's really great to be here.
So one question that really hangs over this whole conversation is, are European alternatives as good as US tech stacks?
I would say in a lot of cases they are. In some cases they are not yet, but I think they're getting there. There's this huge trend at the moment to build up these European alternatives, and I think we're getting there. In case of Nextcloud, we have lots of happy customers who replaced like Microsoft and Google with Nextcloud, and there are no complaints about the functionality or the software. So there are a lot of cases where it's definitely on the same level.
So there's no danger then of losing out on, say, optimal functionality vis-a-vis the US behemoths. You're not going to suffer by going for a European alternative.
The only thing that we hear from our customers is usually if some people are not really flexible to migrate to a new solution. So I don't think nowadays there are no like technical problems. They're more like user acceptance problems. So some people, they are confused if a button is right instead of left or have a different color than before. So I'm an IT person, so I never really realized that this is important. I thought, well, it's obvious. But for a lot of people, it's really important that it really looks the same. And this is something like the user acceptance that is a challenge.
Yeah, you mentioned it a bit already, but maybe we can talk a bit more about vendor lock-in and how it can make these vendor lock-in strategies can make it difficult to switch.
Yes.
Can you talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, this is one of the challenges that we have a lot of customers, partners that are using Microsoft and they want to move to Nextcloud. And I don't know, there are other things in our world where it's super easy. If you want to have a switch to a different gas station, just think of the gas station, it's easy. Go to a different supermarket, it's also very easy. Even switching from one phone provider to another is easy because nowadays you can take your number with you. But switching SaaS services is actually very hard. Usually there are a lot of big migration projects involved because you need to get your data out, which is hard because they don't provide the APIs. So you intentionally make it hard to move the data out and then migrate it somewhere else. And this is unfortunately a process and can take a bit. And this is also why a lot of organizations are afraid of it because it is some work.
This work that you describe, it really makes me wonder, like, is it already too late? You know, when we talk about the German economy, for example, I'm getting a little forest for trees here, but follow me. When we talk about the German economy, it's been kind of bordering on recession for a few years now. There's not a lot of growth. And I'm just looking at these companies who might be thinking, okay, maybe I would like to move to Nextcloud or away from Microsoft in some way, but do they have the money and the time and the will to move to something that's maybe on par or a little bit better or a little bit worse for their needs?
Yeah.
Like, are the economic headwinds too much right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's not a lot of cost that is involved in that. I mean, obviously, migration project takes time, but once you have Nextcloud, it's like similar or cheaper than other companies. So I don't think there's a big financial problem. I see the other way around. I see it even more beneficial if companies use like more open source software like Nextcloud, because my private theory with the problems of the German industry, with the recession, for example, is that you really need to be a little more innovative and you have now more forward-looking products. And we see this at the moment with the car industry. I think the German cars, they are fine, but they are lagging behind in software. So the software stack is really a problem. And this is what I said earlier. We really need to have a strong European software industry and a European German software business, not only for cars, but just for everything. I mean, Mark Andreessen said, oh, software is eating the world, right? And this is happening. So one sector after another. So we have to be better in software.
Just on that, do you think we talk ourselves down too much in Europe? This perception is there that somehow that Europe is kind of like last in the race in the IT crowd.
I think so.
In the IT crowd, for want of a better expression. Do you think do you think we talk ourselves down?
Yes, we do. There are some terms, for example, the term hyperscaler. I don't like that. Because it means,
explain that.
Yeah, because hyperscaler usually is the name for like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, right? The big cloud companies. And hyperscaler implies that you need to be hyper to scale, basically. It means that only the big ones win. That's what it means. And this is wrong. It's actually wrong. There are very strong players in Europe, as I said, like Ionos, OVH, German Telekom, many others. And it's actually funny, if you compare the prices with the one from the hyperscalers, they are not more expensive. So the whole theory that you need to be huge to scale is not exactly true. There are a lot of capable like cloud providers here. Sometimes I get a question, okay, are they really big enough? Then I can bring an example. The German Telekom, they run a service called Magenta Cloud with Nextcloud, and they have like 4.3 million users. Then I ask usually the customer, do you have more or less than 4.3 million users? Most of them have less, so there is no problem. So the infrastructure is there, we just need to use it.
Yeah. Keeping that in mind, that maybe in some ways sovereignty is just a buzzword, is it too late for European companies to actually do anything about this? Or are we witnessing, because we are witnessing this growing monopoly power among major cloud providers, like you said, and their products?
Yeah, it's not too late.
Okay. Give us hope then.
Yeah, I mean, there are services. I mean, for example, we work together with Ionos. We have a very nice service. It's very comparable to Microsoft 365. We even have advanced AI features built into that. And that's available today, and I already have thousands of customers, organizations using it. So this is working. And by the way, I'm saying that it is not too late, but also it can't be too late. Because I mean, what's the alternative? It's like giving up and say like, oh, we are just a digital colony going forward. This cannot be. Looking
ahead, have we passed the turning point, or do you think that there's still a turning point that needs to be turned around over for us here in Europe to actually be able to say, okay, now we are digitally sovereign? Like, when will we know that sovereignty has arrived?
Well, there's no one point in time. Like, sovereignty is done. It's a spectrum. It's a journey, for sure, obviously. And I don't think it's too late. I don't think so. There's actually a lot of talking at the moment. If like 10% of all this talking turns into action, then we're good, I think.
I'm just wondering though, just maybe one final question, because I know that you're your own company. You've got some very high profile clients. You've got German Telecom, the various universities. Do you think that the companies that are going to be leading this charge, the European charge, will be more like, of the scale of your company, do you think?
I'm not sure. I find this a strange situation, to be honest, because we are, as I said, we are the market leader. but we're also 165 people.
Right. Yeah.
So how can we be the market leader and be so small?
Yeah.
And it's just like weird. Of course, in software, you can do a lot with small teams. Right? I think when Instagram was acquired, it was like 10 people or something, right?
Yeah.
Like small teams can be very productive. And I think we are very productive, but on the other hand, we are just very small. So I can see a lot of space for people like us. I mean, the area where we are with digital sovereignty and open source, there are a lot of similar companies can fit there, I think. Bigger ones, I'm not sure. Sometimes you need to be bigger, right, to have a bigger impact. But it also then takes time. You're not getting big like in 1 year.
There you go. That's just a sneak preview of our stories this week from The Dip, where we cover money stories from around the world with the leading experts from around the world.
And of course, if you want more, go ahead and scan that QR code that's appearing on your screen right now, where you can find full episodes and our playlist.
And we'll be back same time next week. Until then, thanks very much for watching The Dip.
The Dip.
Bye.